There are other things that are more important, and you don't want to skip over these other points just to have a higher resolution video. I've set up both cameras, so we're going to see how these two different technologies work. Do I look sunburnt? I was out in the water the last few days and I didn't put any sunscreen on, so I'm probably sunburnt. Hello and welcome to Media Academy Online. Blackmagic, which is an Australian homegrown camera manufacturer, has just released a 12K camera. That's right, 12K. If you don't know what that is, here's 12K. That's the resolution we're getting out of this camera. And that resolution is just insane. And on the other hand, we have these 8K TVs, which personally I think is just a marketing tactic and is a waste of time in most situations. And I've seen this growing trend online about everyone who thinks resolution is the be all and end all. And I'm making this video to basically debunk that myth. And you might be thinking, okay, then what's the point of a 12K camera when an 8K TV doesn't really matter? Now there's a clear distinction with this, and I have to admit that I love resolution, high resolution footage. I work with it all the time on my professional shoots. We're shooting with Red cameras, which is in 8K, and I love it. It is beautiful, it's great. As long as you've got a computer that can handle 8K Red footage, you're sweet, you're golden. Now, I probably sound like I'm completely contradicting myself here by saying that 8K footage is amazing and that 8K TVs don't matter. So let me explain this a little bit further. When I'm editing, the reason why I love to have a high resolution image is because it allows me to crop in, rearrange and reshape as I wish. It gives the editor, it gives the filmmaker more options. When they're creating a film or video or whatever they might be making, it gives so much more flexibility in that. So I dug around for something that I can actually show you. I found this. Most of the stuff I work on I'm not able to show you, but luckily I was able to find something. So I'll quickly show you. This image here has actually been shrunk to fit the size of our workspace here. But if I set this to the full res, we'll now see it is actually the document. The video is actually bigger than our workspace. So if I can drag this around, and so let's say I wanted to reframe it. Maybe I wanted to be closer in, maybe I wanted to be a little bit out. Maybe I wanted to move it to one side so we've got a bit of empty space here, or maybe the opposite, move it this side. There's so many options. And that's not it. We can also do other things like this. If I quickly mock something up here, we can do digital zooms. Set this to, I set one side to all the way in, 100%. All right, so if I run this now, we can see, now I've just created a digital zoom. I've added dynamics to the shot simply because I've had all that extra space to work with. I can even do other things. So if I reset this again, I can even do digital pans even, and then I run that. So now I've just created a digital pan. So now this is where we can really start to play around with different ideas and different concepts simply by having all of this extra real estate to work with. Now the document itself, so that's a set size, but the video is much bigger than the space that I'm working with now. So simply, we can easily see the benefits of having this higher resolution. I can even rotate it, and that I can also animate. So let's say we wanted to do something really crazy. Like now I've put a rotation on it. Because I've got that extra resolution, normally I would have crops on it like this, and you'd have all this blank space. But because I've got that extra real estate to work with, I was able to zoom it in easily without showing those black bars on it. So here's just a few examples of things you can do, and you can get really creative. There's a lot less restraints when you start to play with a document like this. But then when it comes to actually exporting that out to be shown to an audience, that's where things get a little bit more difficult. And let me explain why. I'm going to give you a few examples. First of all, when I'm working on my TV commercials, we're shooting those in 8K. I edit them in 4K, but when we get them sent onto broadcast, they're only ever shown in HD, and in some cases even standard def. So that means that all that extra resolution is wasted. There's no purpose for it. I always edit in 4K because it future-proofs that commercial. For whatever reason the client wants to come back to it in 5 years' time, we still have the 4K edit ready to go. But what about films and movies? Well, when you go to the cinema and you watch the film, most times, if we discount all of these other higher end movie formats like IMAX and others like that, most of the time they're shown in 2K. We're not working in 8K, we're not working in 4K, so just a little bit bigger than HD. And when these films get shown in 4K Blu-ray, usually they're upscaled. So they're actually mastered in 2K and stretched to fit 4K. Now don't get me wrong, if you can edit in higher resolution, then by all means do it. But the point that I'm getting to now is that there are other things that are more important, and you don't want to skip over these other points just to have a higher resolution video. So this is what I plan to do. I'm going to go out onto the beach and we're going to shoot some huts, and I want to compare both HD version and HD version, and also 4K version and 4K versions with different cameras, so that we can see, how two identical resolutions compare depending on what they're shot with. And we can consider all of the other elements that go in to make an image great. I've set up both cameras. I've set up the Blackmagic and the XA10, so we're going to see how these two different technologies work. And I've also got my iPhone 10, so I'll also use that and see the difference. They're set to the exact same resolution, but we get two very different results. If we compare these two shots here, we have an XA10 and a Blackmagic 4K pocket camera, or whatever it's called. The XA10 is a quite old camera. It was my first prosumer camera. And if you look at them like this, it doesn't look too bad. If we color grade them to try and look about the same, it's quite easy to do. But then if we go and zoom in and pixel peep, then we can clearly see there's a difference. Looking at this older camera, it clearly doesn't stand a chance compared to the Pocket 4K, which is shot in ProRes. And keep this in mind that both of these shots are HD, and the resolution isn't different between either of them. But the differences here is that one is shot in ProRes and it holds so much more information than this older format camera does. I've just bought this special adapter for the tripod. It's a newer than everything else I've got in my collection. And it's a pretty nifty little thing. The phone sits in it, you tighten it, boom, and I've already put a plate on it. So I had a spare plate lying around and I've put him on it, and we can rotate him around any direction we want. Look at this. So we'll also get some footage with this and see how it looks. All right, now let's move to a 4K image. Here is the same Blackmagic 4K, and here is one shot on an iPhone 10. We can clearly see that even though they're the same resolution, there is a huge difference in quality. The way that these higher end Blackmagic cameras work, that'll just take in all the information. The iPhone cameras, on the other hand, uses a lot of software to try and guess what the image should look like. They'll do things like grain removal and auto sharpening, and things that when you zoom in on this scale, you can see the differences day and night. There's clearly a difference in image. And now let's change things up again. Let's show a HD version of the Blackmagic 4K image versus a 4K image on the iPhone. Again, even though one has a higher resolution, I personally still think that the Blackmagic 4K image is far superior, even though it has a lower resolution. I have more functionality, I have a higher fidelity image, and personally I think that's more important. And 90% of the time, HD is still perfect for what I need to use it for. And even if I had to show it in a cinema, I can upscale just a little bit to 2K and it'll still work fine. Now let's look at another shot that has a little bit more contrast. Here we can see the Blackmagic on the left has more detail, and you can see the difference with the higher stops of range available. On the right we can see less of that detail and the person is almost completely black. And if I wanted to edit it a little bit more to bring that person out on the Blackmagic, I easily can, because it gives me that flexibility. So the stops of range is also a very important factor, because there isn't even lighting everywhere you go, and even though you'll try and make it as even as possible, there's always situations where it's not going to be. So coming back to my original point, that having a higher resolution image to start with is important. It allows you to fix mistakes that were on the shoot. A shot might be a little bit crooked and needs straightening, or you might have to zoom in a little bit to cut out a microphone or something small like that. So having the higher resolution to start with is great. It means that we have more opportunities as a creative, as a filmmaker, to do things like that. But when it comes to the final exhibition, it really doesn't matter too much. Because when you're watching a TV from a comfortable distance, you don't notice those pixels. And if you're close enough to see those pixels, you're probably too close to that TV. And you'll find, once you start doing more and more work, that the resolution of that image becomes less important. Because broadcast TV is shown at HD, and most of the cinema projectors are shown at 2K. And of course, there'll be circumstances where your film will be shown at 4K. But in all of my years of working professionally, I'm yet to come across a project that needs higher than 4K image. So all in all, if you can edit in 4K, and if you have a camera that has a higher resolution, great. Use those extra pixels to reframe, reshape, and edit the image to how you want it to. Don't worry about editing in 8K if you've got an 8K camera. It is overkill, and you're restricting yourself with the image you create. And if you've got a HD camera, then that's great. Edit in HD. It really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, no matter what video you're making, it all comes down to the principles of storytelling. So always consider the story that you're telling, as that is the most important element of making a film. All of the extra bells and whistles are great, but don't think that you can't get started or you can't make a film with what you've got because you don't have all those extra toys. So what are you waiting for? Go on, make a film, make a story, tell your own narratives with whatever you've got. Because everyone has a story to tell, whether it's in 8K, 4K, HD, standard def, it really doesn't matter. Just go ahead and make a story with whatever you've got. I'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching Media Academy Online. If you'd like to explore more about content, click on this or click on that. Like and subscribe, thumbs up, ring bells, do a dance, sing a song, drink a hot cup of tea or coffee, and I'll see you in the next one.